So now it is time for the thing of the week here on our show, as the regular viewers know. And the thing of the week this week is, it's the youth. Youth, it's the kids. We're going to be talking about kids. We're going to be talking about the teens, the teenagers. What are the teens into? Stuff like that. So with me today, I have Dr. Scooter Blair.
Hello.
He's a psychologist. And I have Richard Bangle.
Hey.
And Richard is a marketing executive who works with marketing to children. So to start this off, I'm going to ask this of both of you. So, a lot of people say that children are our future. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, speaking from the standpoint of, actually, having children, in certain cases, yes, they are, our future, but in a lot of cases, I'd say that they are, our past. Because, as you know, children will eventually grow up and stop being children, which is a horrifying and really terrible process, but it is what it is, and you have to come to terms with that as a parent.
Wow. So you would say that children are our past and our future.
Yes.
And I guess, our present as well.
No.
No.
They are far from presence.
Okay. So, Mr. Bangle, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do believe that children, they really are the future. Because, you have children right now, and you can market to them, but really you're marketing to their parents. Children don't have the purchasing power of the older generations, but if you start collecting data now and you start marketing to children now, eventually they grow up and they become every age demographic. Your 6 to 12 becomes your 13 to 18, becomes your 21 to 88. It's beautiful, really, that if you get in early, you can guarantee that your investment will pay dividends if you're investing in children.
Wow. So children are the future of our economy, too.
Indeed, they are.
All right. So now let's ask Dr. Blair, what is a child, really?
So, I've had a lot of, time to kind of explore this field, and I've spent a lot of my professional life, so about the last 17 years or so, I would say, trying to figure out exactly what is a child. And we've done a lot of, looking at them, sort of like, poking them, that sort of stuff. But really what we've come to find is that children are mini nuclear reactors, as you would say.
Nuclear reactors.
Yes, they are absolutely chock full of radiation, which explains why whenever a child is born, they have no hair.
Okay.
Because it all falls out. Because when a child is born, that is when they're at their highest levels of radiation, and it also explains why as a parent, as you raise a child, your hair turns gray, your hair may fall out, your teeth may fall out. It's so. As of right now, what we know, they are little walking Chernobyls.
Wow. So they're just bursting with this incredible energy.
Yeah, it is.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah, it is quite spectacular.
Wow. Mr. Richard, what do you think about? What do you think about what is a child to you, as a researcher, as a marketer?
Well, a lot of people think that market research is a very callous field, because we use big data, we use anonymized data points. Like we're not really getting up close and personal. That we sometimes look past the personalities, of the people that we're researching, and skip right to the analysis. But I definitely don't believe that, and I'm trying to make it a more human process because a lot of people think that I look at a child and I see, several data points, but in reality, children are several dozen data points. It's really a veritable fruit basket of things to choose from.
Of data points.
Of data points. I mean, you've got your standard ones. You've got, height, weight, age, gender, weight, and there's so much more than that. There's surface level stuff, but then you get down to their likes and dislikes, and then things that make up their personalities, and then you dig even deeper and you find deep-seated fears and insecurities, and that's really what part of what we market to. We try to make everybody as comfortable as possible by exposing them to the products that we're marketing.
Right. So, Dr. Blair,
Yeah.
You've often said in your work that children have a strange capacity for destruction. You've found. So, talk to us about that.
Yeah, so like I said, I've been sort of running experiments for about 17 years or so, and we found that children have this sort of this strange power to conjure up any sort of lethal mechanism that they think of, and it's actually quite fascinating because it becomes a part of the child actually sort of like growing up, and it's for example, when I was raising my kids, one of them would always summon these landmines. And so our house was just full of landmines, and it was like a sort of like a sign that I had a child and that I was raising a child, was having to go through my house and not tread on these landmines. And that's where the real challenge of like being a parent comes in, and the real joy of not stepping on your child's landmine, and really showing that they don't have to be violent.
Okay. So it's the thrill of avoiding these these landmines.
It's the thrill of not exploding.
Wow, that's a really beautiful thing. And I think you are right that kids have a lot of this capacity to destroy. I know one day my own kids, I don't know how they got chainsaws, but they got these chainsaws and they chopped every branch off the tree in our yard. Mm-hmm. And I don't own a chainsaw. I don't know where they got it from, but golly, they did it.
Yeah, my research has shown that chainsaws are in the top 10 of things that children usually manage to conjure up. So you have an example of great parenting if that's what's happening.
Oh wow! I was pretty annoyed. It was I liked that tree. It was a nice tree.
Yeah. Well, but sometimes you have to make sacrifices as a parent.
Yeah, you have to. You have to just let things be destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes. So now, Mr. Richard Bangle. So. Let me ask. You do a lot of research. You know what the kids are doing. So I'll ask this of Richard, and I guess also Dr. Blair. What goes on in a child's mind?
Well, we've been trying to figure that out for years. That's the bulk of my job. We're trying to get down to what goes on inside a child's mind and how
I'm sorry.
And how no
Bless you.
problem. And how we can harness that information for research purposes. So we've actually been working. We've been working with WIST on. They've given us some new technology that they've been developing. It's this chair. It sort of looks like a salon chair
Okay.
that the kids sit in.
It's got the big hat.
It's got the big hat. It's got
Big
the
hat comes
big
down.
seat.
Big
and
seat,
They get
big
to wear they get to wear the big hat. It's a fun time.
They must love that.
They do. They really do. So we give them a candy bar. We show them a video, and then what we do is we download that information onto our servers and make a fully functioning replica of their inner psyche. And so after the first session, we really only need to access that simulation to gather more marketing data, and it's really expedited the market research process.
Wow. Dr. Blair, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so like I said, I've been doing research for about 18 years. And really what we've seen of what happens inside the mind of a child is nuclear fission. A lot of nuclear fission.
Nuclear fission.
Yes. Not much else.
Wow. Nuclear fission. You know, that makes a lot of sense. I gotta admit. So Richard, you know, I'm sure what a lot of our listeners would like to know, who are parents, you know, everybody wants to know, what are the kids into these days?
Well, I
You
mean,
know, what are the kids like?
the kids, the thing is, their tastes change very fast. So we've got a whole team dedicated to monitoring social media, and we've seen recently kids like to construct scale replicas of 18th century leaders,
Okay.
and then ironically blow them up with M80s. This
So
has been
They construct these 18th century figure. What are they constructing it out of?
usually paper mache. Sometimes
Paper
it's,
mache.
sometimes it's more of a complex thing, or something more solid like plaster cast.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
but yeah,
So that's what the kids are into right now.
that's one of the newest
That's
crazes.
picking up on what are the websites the apps that they're using?
The new
that's popping up
the
on
new
there?
apps. Yeah.
Wow. Anything else? Anything else? Any new trends?
Well, actually, yeah. There's a new one. That's actually just cropped up pretty recently, and it's quite dangerous.
It's a dangerous trend.
It is a dangerous trend. Where these kids, you know, they're dedicating their lives to memorizing the stand-up routines of Joan Rivers,
Okay.
and then they, they've been warned against this, but they go to these seedy places, or they go to these dive bars, these comedy clubs, these places where kids are not supposed to be, and they recite this stand-up, and it doesn't always go over well because they don't always know their audience.
What's that called?
That's jonesing.
Jonesing.
So, parents really need to be on the lookout for that.
That's terrifying. I know. I for one would never ever want my children to enter the world of stand-up comedy. That's something I'm very firm about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So-
and having done research in this field for about 19 years or so, I have to say that comedy is probably one of the most hurtful things that you can give to a child.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked. I think dangerous teen trends is an important topic, and we'll talk a lot more about that in a little bit. But so this is again a question for Mr. Bangle. So Richard, how do you keep up with all these trends?
Well,
What do you do to connect with the teens? And how do you make sure you're keeping up on all these brand new things? Because they're cropping up constantly. Studies estimate that 5,000 new teen trends are cropping up, every minute, and about half as many are disappearing at the same rate.
Yeah, it's really hard to keep up with all of them. We have an entire department dedicated just to monitoring social media to keep up with these trends. The information age has allowed these trends to accelerate at a breakneck pace. And what we've found recently is that it's honestly not even entirely worth it to keep up with the trends because they're brought up and they expire so soon.
Right.
By the time we get a hold of them, they're usually passé. So we're working on an experimental incubator group that creates new teen trends.
Mm-hmm.
So we have them on the ground in social media running, these grassroots campaigns to try to get kids engaged with brands in a way that speaks to them culturally.
Okay. So, what do you have any examples of that?
Well, a lot of what we're working on is kind of under wraps. It's going to be launched soon, but we've got a few new trends coming up. We've got Velcroing is going to be it's going to be a popular new one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard a lot about do you know about the Quebec tourism industry? And you've worked with them, is that correct?
Absolutely.
So you've worked with them on their new hip slogan to try and get people to visit Quebec. What is it?
It's just a straight up QUEBEC.
And that's said in like a kind of like a chant?
Yes. That's what the cries are going to be at the Quebec tourism rallies.
QUEBEC. That's pretty catchy.
Yeah.
That's pretty catchy. So what are you doing? Really, you're trying to get you're trying to connect with the kids at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
As sometimes as early as possible. Correct?
Yeah.
So how are you doing that?
So it's all about getting in as early as possible, as you said. The earlier we influence brand recognition, the more success we'll have in the future as these kids develop. So we're actually we're working on a pilot program wherein new mothers can receive compensation in exchange for participating in the study that we're running, where they get temporary tattoos all over their face, usually the forehead, sometimes the cheeks. We have some customers who ask for one on the nose, and these are all fitted with brand imagery.
So temporary tattoos of brand logos.
Yes.
Okay. So what are some of those? What are some of the logos?
I mean, so we've got some pretty big players. We've got your Coca-Cola, we've got your Starbucks, we've got your Monsanto. There are just a lot of companies that want this prime real estate because, as psychology tells us, children learn to recognize their mother's face. It's one of the first things they learn. So if they associate that feeling with this brand logo, eventually in the future we'll have instantaneous brand recognition, and we're hoping that results in some positive brand responses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Wow.
Just to kind of butt in here, if that's all right. There is a small danger with this, in that the child could sort of take in the presence of the logo as a what did you call them? A temporary tattoo?
Temporary
Yes.
tattoos.
Yeah. Which, as you all know, is a sort of like a gateway drug of sorts.
Okay.
So you have to be very careful that you don't leave them on there for too long, because
Right.
then the child will not associate the brand, but it will associate the temporary tattoo, which can lead them to all kinds of dangerous things.
Getting even more temporary tattoos.
Yes, and then things like music, things like comedy, stuff that's very damaging to a growing child
So-
and their bones.
Temporary tattoos could lead to real tattoos and a real danger if they start getting into things like music and comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So I think that's a perfect segue, since we're talking so much about a lot of the dangers facing our youth. Let's talk about some of these dangerous teen trends. Of course, we mentioned jonesing earlier in the program, which is children memorizing Joan Rivers stand-up and performing it at comedy clubs. But we've also got what do we got here? Admonishing is one. That's when kids are angrily scolding each other. We've got splurging is another one. I don't know what that is, but it doesn't sound good. What else we got here? I believe urban outfitting
Oh yes,
is one that
Yes.
you've spoken a lot at length about.
Yes. So, of the about 20 years or so that I've been working in this field, I've spent the last 3 or so. So it's a pretty, not a recent trend, but it's one that's sort of stuck around for a very long time and has recently had a resurgence of sorts. And it's where essentially you take all of your clothes and you cover it in Velcro. And then you find other people in the street that are also covered in Velcro, and you just kind of stick to them. And what ends up happening is you get these giant masses of Velcro teens that cause all kinds of havoc.
That's terrifying.
yes.
So like they're blocking traffic.
Mm-hmm.
They're just rolling around. I assume when they get enough of them, you get these big balls of teens rolling over cars.
Yes, that doesn't happen very often, thankfully. But there was one incident back in 2014, right around the time that this was sort of happening. It was in Seattle, I believe, where about 500 teens actually formed into this ball, and they wrecked most of downtown Seattle. So yeah, it is extremely dangerous. That sort of activity is kind of died out after that because it was so very dangerous. But the actual act of sticking yourself to someone else is still very much extremely popular.
Wow. So what are we doing to kind of stop, because you can't stop the onslaught of teen trends, as we've discussed on this program. They're just going to keep coming up with new ones. So Mr. Bangle, what can we do to kind of alleviate some of the dangers of these?
Well, what my firm is doing, I mean, not only are we working to create our own positive teen trends,
Right.
Safe, not harmful to the public or these youths themselves. We're actually working with certain brands in an effort to curb the current dangerous teen trends. We actually had a really successful campaign recently.
Sorry.
Had you heard of planking when that was in its prime?
Yes. Planking.
Yeah. So I mean,
can you explain what planking is for our listeners?
yeah, for the uninitiated, planking was when kids affixed 2x4s to their body. They just covered themselves in this wood and then used their bodies as the basis for building structures in urban environments. And it obviously was incredibly dangerous because these structures they built, most of these kids, they're not engineers. They're not architects. They're just kids off the street.
They're just kids. They don't know what they're doing.
They really don't. They don't have the experience needed to construct sound buildings. So most of them weren't up for code. I read that 80% of them didn't even have running water.
Wow.
So they were basically they were uninhabitable. in
that's
addition
crazy.
to being structurally unsound.
So these kids are just building these bizarre, uninhabitable structures all over towns across America. So what were you doing? You were working with Coca-Cola at the time,
Yes.
I believe, to stop that.
Yeah, it was a partnership, and it was a really great opportunity. It was a partnership between us, Coca-Cola, and Habitat for Humanity, where we actually Coca-Cola used their media reach to advertise the campaign in conjunction with our ad division, and Habitat for Humanity. We had a bunch of wonderful volunteers that actually went in and dismantled these buildings, and we were able to save most of these kids from planking.
Wow, that's fantastic. Now, I believe that's all the time we have for today. Is there anything else you two would like to add?
I was just gonna say that something that I've been sort of trying to work on is I actually went to the UN a few years ago, and I talked with Webster as well, and we tried to get the word trend or the words trending and trends actually taken out of our language.
So remove the word trend from the language
Yes.
entirely.
Yeah. So then, if these kids don't have a name for what they're doing, then they can't promote it, and they can't sort of, I guess, and
They can't put a name to these things,
Yes.
so it would just stop altogether.
yeah. So yeah. I tried to do that. It was about 4.5 years. And unfortunately, it did not pass. But
Well, no one can say that you didn't try.
actually, they can't say that because while we did not manage to get rid of the word trend, we did manage to get rid of the word try.
But you just
You just said
yeah. You just said
Yeah, but you didn't understand it.
that.
Oh, you're right.
That is true.
See?
So that's pretty much it for today. But I'd like to close out with a list of some dangerous teen trends. And, in addition to jonesing, admonishing, urban outfitting, and planking, we've also got, screaming, whispering, hacking, and bawling. So, if you hear any of your kids talking about those, you better look out. So, gentlemen, thank you for coming into the studio today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So, we're going to get back into the music now. We got some fun stuff coming up.